The pressure event hit at 4:12 local and took platform Vorith 7 apart from the inside. Petra Hale was already in the operations center when it happened. She had been there for 20 minutes, because the lower deck compression readings had been wrong for 3 hours, and wrong readings at 350 on a high-altitude extraction platform meant you did not go back to sleep. She was at the primary monitoring console, stylus in hand, when the wellhead on Deck 9 lost containment. The pressure gauge on that feed line went from nominal to critical to non-existent in the time it took her to read the number. Then the explosion came up through the deck plates like a fist. She grabbed the console with both hands and stayed on her feet. The lights cut to emergency red. The alarm system, which had been designed by Vorith Platform Authority engineers, and was therefore 11 distinct tones happening simultaneously, began doing exactly that. Petra was 27 years old and had been the senior human contractor on Vorith 7 for 8 months. Halcyon Deep Systems had been hired to run extraction operations here because the Vorith were exceptional engineers of atmospheric infrastructure, and significantly less exceptional at the fluid dynamics of high-pressure gas extraction in a Class 4 planet's upper cloud layer. They had drilled into something they did not entirely understand and had needed humans to manage the consequences. She was managing consequences now. Platform Authority, this is Hale. Deck 9 wellhead failure, full blowout event. I need a status report on decks 7 through 11 right now. She was already moving to the secondary console, pulling up the pressure topology map while she spoke. The extraction column, a 600-meter shaft driven down through the platform's lower hull into the gas stratum below, was open. Not partially open. Open. The blowback pressure coming up that column was reading at 3 times the rated maximum of the containment stack, and the containment stack no longer existed. The response from Platform Authority came back in segments, the translation matrix smoothing the Vorith's clicking tonal speech into flat English. There is fire on Deck 9. Decks 10 and 11 are being evacuated. We are reading 14 personnel unaccounted for in the lower sections. How many are Vorith and how many are human? 11 Vorith, 3 humans, your team, Contractor Hale. Petra's jaw tightened. She pulled the personnel manifest. 3 of her people, Yusuf Khan, her lead pressure technician, Adiz Morrow, structural systems, and the youngest member of her crew, 19-year-old apprentice Tamaz Riley, who had been scheduled for a rest cycle but had apparently clocked back in at midnight because the readings were wrong, and he was that kind of person. Give me their last logged positions. The map updated. Yusuf and Adiz were showing biosignals from the emergency shelter on Deck 10. They had made it. Tamaz was showing at the lower maintenance hub on Deck 9, 40 meters from the wellhead, and his biosignal was active but not moving. She did not think about what that meant for more than 2 seconds, because 2 seconds was all she could give it. I need a fire suppression team on the Deck 9 access route, and I need them now, she told Platform Authority. Then she keyed her emergency beacon, not the platform system, which ran through Vorith relay infrastructure, but the Halcyon Deep Systems emergency transponder clipped to her belt, the one that went directly to Earth's orbital crisis registry. She held the activation button for 3 seconds, released it, and spoke her incident code into the receiver. Halcyon Emergency, Platform Vorith 7, Atmospheric Extraction Platform, Cloud Layer Class 4, Wellhead Blowout, 14 unaccounted personnel, containment failure in progress. This is a full extraction emergency. Acknowledge. The registry acknowledged 6 seconds later with a case number, and the phrase all available Earth assets are being notified. She had filed 2 prior emergency reports. Both times that phrase had meant a status update in 4 hours and a case manager calling in 12. She filed it because protocol required it and stopped thinking about it. The fire suppression team Platform Authority sent was two Vorth workers with handheld suppressant canisters and expressions she recognized across species lines as "We are doing this because it was requested, and not because we believe it will work." She had learned to read Vorth facial carapace the way she read pressure gauges, by the angle of their mandible plates, by whether their secondary eye cluster was tracking or fixed. These two were fixed. They were scared. She pulled a suppressant harness from the emergency locker herself, snapped the coupling, and went in front of them. Deck 9 was unrecognizable. The wellhead assembly, the crown stack, the annular preventer, all of it, was simply gone, replaced by a column of superheated gas venting through the hole it had made in the ceiling. The fire at the column's perimeter was not open flame in the conventional sense, but a curtain of blue-white combustion, where extracted gas met the platform's atmospheric mix, and it was loud in a way that registered in the chest rather than the ears. The maintenance hub was accessible through a side corridor the blast had partially cleared. Petra moved along the wall, staying low. The two Vorth followed her, which she had not expected and which she noted. She found Tamaz wryly slumped against the hub bulkhead, with a deck plate across his legs. He was conscious, eyes open and tracking, and when he saw her he said something she couldn't hear over the column noise. She read his face well enough. His legs were not broken, she checked fast, hands running the bone lines, but the plate had him pinned by weight alone, and it weighed a great deal. She looked at the two Vorth behind her. Vorth industrial cast were built for heavy atmospheric work, broad thorax, 4 functional limbs, a center of mass low to the ground. She pointed to the plate. She held up 3 fingers. She counted down. They understood, they lifted. She pulled Tamaz clear. He got to his feet with her help and stood, his legs held. He said, at a volume that cut through the column noise, "I clocked back in at midnight because the readings were wrong." "I know," she said, "I was there too." They got out of Deck 9 in 4 minutes. The column was still going. Back in the operations center, Petra worked through what she had. The containment stack was gone. The emergency sealant system had failed to engage because it needed the stack to seal against, and the column was still open and venting. She pulled the engineering drawings and worked through options. There was one, it was not a good one. The column could be killed from below, from the lower hull maintenance crawlway, where 4 isolation valves were accessible by manual override. The automated system was offline. The remote stations were on Deck 9. Manual override required a person in the crawlway at each valve in sequence, with a crank wrench and about 40 minutes. The crawlway was 40 meters below the active wellhead column. She was working through the safety profile of this option when the Halcyon emergency transponder on her belt chirped. She unclipped it and looked at the screen. "Hail, this is Director Vasquez, Halcyon Crisis Operations. Your beacon triggered a Category 1 extraction emergency under the Earth Compact Response Charter. I have the following assets inbound to your position. 1 Halcyon Emergency Response Vessel, ETR 63 minutes. 1 Earth Compact Medical Ship, ETR 71 minutes. Fire suppression team aboard the ERV, 7 qualified professionals. A structural engineering consult team, 4 persons. Additionally, the Platform Authority has been notified that 2 Earth Compact Engineering Corvettes are diverting from the Cathari shipping corridor and will reach your position in approximately 90 minutes. I need a current status report and your extraction count." Petra read the message twice. She had activated her emergency transponder and expected a case number. She had received a case number. She had also received 2 engineering corvettes, a medical ship, a full emergency response vessel with 7 suppression specialists, and a structural team, all of them already moving. She filed her status report. 14 unaccounted for at activation, 12 now recovered, 2 Vorth from the lower deck still unaccounted for. Their biosignals had dropped off the manifest. She did not write missing. The manifest system had been offline for 3 minutes during the initial blast, and she was not prepared to assume. Then she went back to the crawlway. "Platform authority," she said over the intercom. "I need your best physical worker, someone not afraid of confined spaces and will not panic. I have a job." The Vorath who arrived 11 minutes later was named, phonetically, something the translation matrix rendered as Ket. He was the platform's atmospheric maintenance chief, 7 years of crawlway work on this rig, with the carapace scarring of high-pressure environments and close calls with uncooperative equipment. He looked at the engineering drawings she showed him. He looked at the crawlway access panel. He made a clicking sound the matrix did not translate and picked up the crank wrench. They went in together. The crawlway was designed for Vorath proportions, which meant Petra moved through it sideways, in a sustained crouch that began to ache at the 12-minute mark. Ket moved ahead of her. The column noise was everywhere. A continuous roar transmitted through the extraction shaft wall close enough to touch, radiating heat whenever the crawlway curved toward it. The isolation valves were spaced every 10 meters, 4 valves in sequence, each requiring a specific torque she read off the laminated card she'd pulled from the engineering locker before they descended. The first valve took 9 minutes. Ket knew where it was. Petra had the torque spec. They worked in parallel, she called the sequence. He applied the wrench. The valve turned. The roar above them shifted in pitch barely, but she caught it. The second took 6 minutes. Ket was faster now. The third was corroded. The override nut had seized partway through its arc and stopped. She held up a fist, "Stop." She pulled the small tube of emergency lubricant from her harness pocket, worked it into the joint by feel in the confined space, waited 90 seconds, and nodded. Ket applied force again. The nut broke free with a sound like a gunshot and completed its arc. The column noise dropped another degree in pitch. The fourth valve was straightforward. When the last one seated, the column went from a roar to a rumble to a sustained hiss to silence in approximately 40 seconds. The silence, after 51 minutes of extraction column noise, was the loudest thing Petra had heard in years. She held still in the crawlway for a moment. Ket's carapace plates, rigid and slightly elevated since they entered, settled. She did not have a precise translation for what that meant. She thought she understood it anyway. They came up out of the crawlway into the lower maintenance bay to find that the emergency response vessel had arrived 6 minutes early, docked at the platform's emergency port with all 7 suppression specialists already deploying. The medical team was in the operations center. The structural engineering consult team was on Deck 9 assessing the wellhead cavity. The 2 missing Vorath had been found in a sealed secondary shelter on Deck 11. Their biosignals hadn't been broadcasting because the shelter's transmitter was on the same relay that had blown in the initial event. They were dehydrated and shaken, and otherwise entirely intact. Director Vasquez called on the emergency channel at 6:19, 2 hours and 7 minutes after the blowout. "Hail status. Column sealed. All 14 accounted for. Deck 9 is offline. The wellhead cavity will need a structural team for at least 3 weeks. Your engineering consultants are already on it. Platform is stable." A brief silence. "The corvettes will still arrive in about 30 minutes. They've been told to stand by." "Tell them thank you." Another silence. "Hail." The charter response was automatic. When a Category 1 goes through our system, it triggers the full allocation regardless of what the caller expects. "I know you filed expecting a case manager." "I filed because protocol required it." "I know," a pause. "That's why the protocol exists." She thought about that. The 2 Earth Compact engineering corvettes arrived at 6:59. The lead corvette offered its structural team as additional support for the wellhead cavity restoration. Platform Authority's response came through the translation matrix with a slight delay that suggested the officer on the other end was recalibrating something. "Your vessels," the platform authority controller said carefully. They came because the contractor's emergency beacon. That's correct. She activated a single emergency transponder, one signal. Yes. A longer pause. We did not know the Earth response to a single signal was 2 warships and a medical fleet. The corvette commander's voice was pleasantly neutral. It's not a warship response. We're here as engineering support. Yes, said the platform authority controller, in a tone that suggested she was not entirely certain this distinction was as meaningful as the corvette commander believed it to be. Petra filed her incident report at 7:24. Every asset deployed, every action taken, every decision in sequence with timestamps. She noted that apprentice Tamaz Riley had voluntarily remained on duty during his rest cycle due to anomalous readings, which had placed him near the initial event, but also meant an experienced eye on the lower deck instrumentation at the precise moment that eye was needed. She recommended him for a commendation. Then she found Yusuf and Adiz in the operations center and told them briefly what had happened in the crawlway. Yusuf nodded the way he always nodded, once thorough, filing it. Adiz looked at her for a moment, then looked at the structural team working on the Deck 9 assessment. They sent a lot of people. They did, Petra said. For one beacon. Apparently that's what happens. Adiz was quiet for a moment. Then, good. The platform stabilized fully by 1100. The structural consult team stayed 4 days. The emergency response vessel stayed 2. The corvettes held station for 18 hours and departed in the early afternoon with a brief, unelaborated farewell on the emergency channel. Platform Authority's final incident review noted, in the section marked external support, that the Earth Compact emergency response to a single contractor beacon on a non-Earth facility had exceeded any external support the platform had previously received in its operational history. The review recommended that future contracts with Halcyon Deep Systems include a rider specifying emergency response protocols, so that Platform Authority could update its evacuation planning to account for the possibility that, in a crisis, a substantial portion of Earth's regional engineering capacity might simply arrive. Ket stopped by the operations center the afternoon before the last Earth vessel departed. He stood in the doorway, and Petra looked up from her incident log. His mandible plates were in a configuration she'd come to understand as acknowledgement, not gratitude exactly, but something larger, the kind that comes after a person has had time to think about what happened and has decided it was real. He said something in Vorath. The translation matrix caught it as the valve. She said the lubricant, always carry lubricant. He made the clicking sound again. She still didn't have a translation for it. She thought it was possibly the Vorath version of a laugh. He left. She went back to the log.